The notification pinged on my phone at 7:15 p.m. on a Thursday. Got invited to a client dinner. Might be home late. My wife's message was brief, professional. Exactly like the hundreds of others she'd sent over our 8-year marriage. She worked in real estate and client dinners were part of the routine. I trusted her completely. We'd met in college during a study group for Economics 101. She was sharp-driven with a laugh that could light up the entire lecture hall. We dated for 3 years before I proposed on the same campus bench where we'd first talked about our dreams. Our wedding was small but perfect, surrounded by close friends and family who all said we were meant to be. My college roommate Marcus had been there through it all. He was the best man at our wedding, the godfather to our plans for future children, the guy who helped me move into our first apartment and later our first house. We'd been inseparable since freshman year like brothers. He knew my fears, my ambitions, even my passwords to streaming accounts. That's how close we were. About 4 months ago, things began shifting in ways I couldn't quite name. My wife started working later, taking more calls in the other room. She'd come home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. When I asked about her day, her answers became vague, rehearsed. Just the usual chaos at the office, she'd say, scrolling through her phone. Marcus also became distant. Our weekly basketball games suddenly conflicted with his work commitments. Our group chat went silent. When I texted him directly, his responses were one-word answers. I told myself everyone gets busy. Life happens. We're all just adulting now. That Thursday night, I decided to surprise my wife. I'd order from her favorite Thai restaurant and bring it to her office. Maybe we could eat together during a break in her client meetings. I wanted to reconnect, to feel like we were still that couple who stayed up all night talking about nothing and everything. I drove to her office building downtown, parking in the visitor section. The Thai food sat warm in the passenger seat, smelling of basil and lemongrass. I texted her, "Surprise! I'm downstairs with dinner." I waited for the response. 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10. Then I saw them, walking out of the building's side entrance, hand in hand, laughing. My wife and Marcus. They stopped under a streetlight, and he pulled her close, kissing her forehead tenderly. She leaned into him like it was the most natural thing in the world. What would you do if you saw your whole world crumble in a single moment? Stay tuned to find out what I did next. I sat frozen in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The Thai food beside me was getting cold, but I couldn't move. I watched them walk toward the parking garage, still holding hands, still looking at each other with that intimate familiarity that should have been reserved for me. They didn't notice my car. Why would they? I was supposed to be at home, clueless, waiting like a loyal puppy for my wife to return from her client dinner. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I had been the fool in this story for months, maybe longer. I drove home in a fog. The food went straight into the trash. I poured myself a glass of whiskey I didn't really want and sat in the dark living room thinking. My mind raced through every recent memory, reanalyzing every strange moment, every canceled plan, every odd excuse. The business trip to Seattle 3 months ago, had Marcus been there too? The weekend she spent at a conference in Miami, was that even real? The new lingerie I'd found in her drawer that she'd never worn for me, was it for him? I felt sick. But beneath the nausea and heartbreak, something else began to grow. Cold, calculated determination. I wasn't going to confront them yet. I wasn't going to cry or beg or demand explanations. I was going to find out everything first. Every single detail of their betrayal. The next morning I acted completely normal. I made coffee. I kissed my wife goodbye when she left for work, studying her face for any sign of guilt. There was none. She smiled at me, the same smile I'd fallen in love with years ago, and said, "Love you." I said it back, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Once she was gone, I began my investigation. I started with our shared cloud storage. She'd never thought to hide anything there because she never suspected I'd look. I found folders within folders, buried deep in what looked like work documents. Photos. Dozens of them. Her and Marcus at restaurants, beaches, hotel rooms. Some were innocent-looking, just two friends hanging out. Others were unmistakably romantic. I downloaded everything onto an external hard drive. Then I checked our credit card statements. There were charges I'd never questioned before. Hotels and cities she claimed were for work, expensive dinners, jewelry purchases. I'd assumed they were gifts for me that hadn't been given yet. How naive I'd been. I created a spreadsheet. Dates, locations, expenses, photos, everything organized and documented. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clinical, methodical, treating this like a research project. You won't believe what I discovered next in the text messages that were never deleted. On Saturday morning, my wife announced she was going to yoga class. She'd started going regularly about 6 months ago, or so she said. I nodded, smiled, told her to have fun. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, I went to work. I'd noticed she'd become protective of her phone recently, keeping it face down, taking it everywhere, even to the bathroom. But she had an old tablet we'd used for recipes and grocery lists that was synced to her accounts. She'd forgotten about it. I powered it on and waited for it to load. My heart pounded as I opened her messaging apps. Most of her recent texts had been deleted, but cloud backups are persistent things. I dug into the settings, found the backup restoration option, and waited. 10 minutes later I had everything. Months of messages between her and Marcus flooded the screen. I sat on our bed where we'd made promises to each other, and read through their secret life. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I miss your touch. This sneaking around is exciting, but I wish we didn't have to hide. He has no idea. Sometimes I feel guilty, but then I'm with you and it all makes sense. I read every message, each one a small dagger. They talked about their future together, about me like I was an obstacle to work around. Marcus had written, "When are you going to tell him? We can't keep doing this forever." Her response, "Soon. I just need to figure out the right timing. And the finances." The finances. That's what I was to her now, a financial complication. I found something else too. Plans for a weekend trip to a cabin upstate. The dates were next month. They'd been planning this for weeks, coordinating schedules, discussing what lies they'd tell. She was going to say it was a work retreat. He was going to tell his girlfriend, yes, Marcus had a girlfriend too, that he had a business conference. I took screenshots of everything. Every message, every plan, every lie. I backed them up in 3 different locations. Then I carefully restored the tablet to exactly how she'd left it, as if I'd never touched it. When she came home from yoga, she was glowing, relaxed. "Great class," she said, kissing my cheek. I noticed the faint smell of his cologne on her clothes. She hadn't been to yoga. She'd been with him. "I'm glad you enjoyed it," I said calmly. "You seem happier lately." "I am," she said, smiling. "I really am." Little did she know. Her happiness was about to be shattered into pieces she'd never be able to put back together. I spent the next 2 weeks observing them like a scientist studying specimens. I noted patterns. They met every Tuesday and Thursday, usually at a boutique hotel downtown. She'd tell me she had late showings. He'd tell his girlfriend he had gym time. The precision of their lies was almost impressive. I followed them once. I'm not proud of it, but I needed to see with my own eyes. I watched them check into the hotel, his hand on the small of her back, her leaning into him. They looked like a real couple, comfortable and familiar. It had been at least 6 months, I realized. Probably longer. During this time, I consulted with a divorce attorney. I did it discreetly, using my lunch breaks, paying in cash. The lawyer was a sharp woman named Catherine who'd seen cases like mine before. She looked at my evidence, the photos, messages, credit card statements, and nodded approvingly. "You have everything you need," she said. "With this kind of documentation, you're looking at a very favorable outcome. Infidelity affects asset division in this state, especially when marital funds were used for the affair." I asked her about timing. She advised me to wait until I had even more financial documentation. "Get copies of everything," she said. "Bank statements, tax returns, investment accounts, property deeds. The more complete your picture, the better." So I waited. I played the loving husband while secretly photocopying documents, downloading bank records, forwarding important emails to a private account. My wife had no idea that every day she smiled at me, every lie she told, I was building a case that would dismantle everything we'd built together and ensure I kept what was rightfully mine. One evening, Marcus came over for dinner. My wife had suggested it, saying we hadn't hung out in a while. The audacity was breathtaking. They sat across from each other at my dinner table, making small talk, their feet probably touching under the table. I served the lasagna I'd made and watched them perform. "This is great, man," Marcus said, raising his beer to me. "We should do this more often." "Absolutely," I agreed, smiling. "It's been too long. We're still brothers, right?" He hesitated for just a fraction of a second before answering. "Always." My wife watched our exchange with carefully concealed tension. I could see the worry in her eyes. Did he suspect? Had Marcus given something away? I let them both squirm in their uncertainty, serving dessert and making pleasant conversation about nothing important. They thought they were getting away with it, but I was 3 steps ahead with a plan that would change everything. My investigation took an unexpected turn when I hired a private investigator. Catherine, my attorney, had recommended him, a former police detective named Raymond with 30 years of experience. I gave him all the information I had. Names, locations, patterns. He promised to dig deeper. 2 weeks later, he called me with news I wasn't expecting. "Your friend Marcus," Raymond said over the phone. "He's not just seeing your wife. There are others." I sat down heavily. "What do you mean, others?" "At least 2 other women that I've confirmed. One is a coworker of his, the other is someone he met through a dating app. He's been juggling all of you, your wife, these women, and his official girlfriend for months." The betrayal had layers I hadn't imagined. Marcus wasn't in love with my wife. He was a serial cheater, and she was just one of his conquests. Did she know? Was she aware she wasn't the only other woman in his life? Raymond sent me his report. Photos of Marcus with different women, timestamps, locations. The man was running relationships like a business, keeping schedules, maintaining separate phones for different people. He'd been lying to everyone, including my wife. I felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, the betrayal cut even deeper. My best friend wasn't even genuine in his affair. It was all a game to him. On the other hand, I now had leverage I hadn't anticipated. That evening, I did something calculated. I created an anonymous email account and sent my wife a single photo. Marcus with another woman, clearly on a date, taken just 3 days ago. I included no message, no explanation. Just the photo. I watched her open the email on her tablet later that night while I pretended to read in bed. Her face went through a range of emotions. Confusion, recognition, shock, anger. She stared at the photo for a long time. "Something wrong?" I asked casually. She jumped slightly, closing the tablet quickly. "No, just work drama." "Want to talk about it?" "No, it's fine. Just annoying." But it wasn't fine. I could see the wheels turning in her head. Over the next few days, she became distracted, checking her phone constantly, texting more than usual. Her messages to Marcus, which I was still monitoring, became tense, questioning. She was confronting him, and he was denying everything. Their affair was crumbling from the inside. I hadn't even had to do anything except plant a seed of doubt. But I wasn't done yet. The real plan was still to come, and it would expose both of them in ways they never imagined. I decided the confrontation needed to be perfect, not just for justice but for closure. I couldn't simply divorce my wife quietly. Both of them needed to face consequences beyond just losing me. They needed to face the truth in front of everyone who mattered. I planned an intervention dinner at our house, inviting both sets of parents, mine, hers, and Marcus's. I also invited Marcus's girlfriend, Sarah, a kind woman who worked as a pediatric nurse and had no idea what her boyfriend was doing. The invitation was framed as an important family gathering, with no further explanation. My wife was confused but went along with it. "What's this about?" she asked when I told her about the dinner. "Just want to bring everyone together," I said. "It's been a while, and I think we all need to reconnect." The night arrived. Everyone gathered in our living room. My parents, her parents, Marcus's mother and stepfather, Sarah, Marcus, and my wife. The atmosphere was awkward, everyone wondering why they'd been summoned. I offered drinks and appetizers, playing the gracious host. When everyone was settled, I stood up and cleared my throat. "Thank you all for coming. I asked you here because I've learned something important, and I think you all deserve to know the truth." My wife's face went pale. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Everyone else looked confused. I connected my laptop to our TV screen. For the past several months, my wife and my best friend have been having an affair. The room erupted. Her mother gasped. My father stood up angrily. Marcus's girlfriend Sarah looked like she'd been slapped. That's not. My wife started, but I held up my hand. Please let me finish. I have evidence. I clicked through the presentation I'd prepared. Photos of them together, screenshots of their messages, credit card statements showing hotel charges, timestamps and locations. Everything methodically organized and impossible to deny. I watched their faces as the truth unfolded on the screen. My wife was crying. Marcus looked cornered, defeated. Their parents were in shock, anger beginning to register. Sarah stood up and walked directly to Marcus, slapping him hard across the face before walking out, leaving the door open behind her. How could you? My mother-in-law said to her daughter, her voice breaking. And with him? Marcus's mother said, looking at her son with disgust. With your best friend's wife? I let them all absorb it, saying nothing. I didn't need to add commentary. The evidence spoke volumes. My wife reached for me, trying to explain, but I stepped back. I've already filed for divorce, I said calmly. I wanted you all to know why. I didn't want anyone to wonder or make excuses on their behalf. What happened next tore apart more than just my marriage. It destroyed entire family relationships. The divorce proceedings were brutal, but I was prepared. Catherine, my attorney, was relentless. With all the evidence I'd gathered, my wife had little ground to stand on. In our state, adultery directly affected asset division, and the fact that marital funds had been used to support the affair made things even worse for her. During discovery, we uncovered more financial betrayal. My wife had been slowly moving money into a separate account I didn't know about, preparing for her eventual exit. She'd taken out a credit card in both our names and maxed it out on purchases for Marcus, expensive watches, clothes, weekend getaways. I hadn't seen any of the statements because she'd changed the mailing address to her office. The judge was not sympathetic to her case. When Catherine presented the evidence of financial deception on top of the affair, you could see the disapproval on his face. My wife's attorney tried to argue that I was being vindictive, that this was an emotional overreaction. The judge shut that down quickly. This isn't about emotion, he said. This is about clear violation of marital trust and misuse of joint assets. The evidence is overwhelming. I was awarded the house, the car we'd purchased together, and a significant portion of our savings. She was ordered to pay back the credit card debt she'd secretly accumulated. It wasn't about the money for me, it was about accountability. Meanwhile, Marcus was facing his own consequences. Sarah had wasted no time telling everyone in their social circle what had happened. Word spread through our community like wildfire. Marcus worked at a local marketing firm where reputation mattered, and when the full story came out, including the fact that he'd been seeing multiple women simultaneously, his professional image took a serious hit. 2 of his biggest clients dropped him, citing trust issues and not wanting to be associated with his personal drama. His boss called him in for a meeting about maintaining professional standards. While they couldn't fire him for his personal life, they made it clear his path for advancement had been seriously damaged. The other women he'd been seeing also found out about each other. One of them worked in the same building, and she made sure everyone knew exactly what kind of person Marcus was. He became a pariah in his own workplace, eating lunch alone, avoided in hallways. My wife tried to reach out to him for support during this time, but according to the messages I was still able to monitor, he'd gone cold on her too. He blamed her for the exposure, saying if she'd been more careful, none of this would have happened. Their affair, built on lies and betrayal, collapsed under the weight of its own deception. But the story doesn't end there. The final confrontation would reveal something I never saw coming. 3 months into the divorce proceedings, I received a phone call from an unknown number. A woman's voice I didn't recognize said, "Is this about Marcus Chun and your wife?" I was immediately on guard. Who is this? My name is Diana. I was one of the women Marcus was seeing. But I need to tell you something about your wife that I don't think you know. We agreed to meet at a neutral location. A coffee shop across town where we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. Diana turned out to be a sharp-dressed woman in her mid-30s who worked in finance. She had documentation of her own. Messages, photos, bank transfers. I started seeing Marcus about 8 months ago, she explained. He told me he was single. I found out later he wasn't, but what I really found out was worse. She slid a folder across the table to me. Your wife was paying him. I stared at her. What? She was paying Marcus to be with her. $1,000 transfers, sometimes more. Look at these bank records. I managed to get access to one of his accounts through, let's say, unconventional means. Every few weeks, a payment from an account in her name. I flipped through the documents, my mind reeling. The transfers were real, dated over the past 7 months. Thousands of dollars flowing from my wife's secret account to Marcus's account. I don't understand, I said. Why would she pay him? Diana shrugged. Best I can figure, he was manipulating her. Maybe he said he needed money for things, or maybe it was transactional from the start. But she was definitely funding whatever they had going on. This changed everything. My wife hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been essentially paying for a relationship with a con artist. Marcus hadn't been her partner in betrayal. He'd been using her, just like he'd used everyone else. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated. This proved how deep the deception went. But another part of me felt a strange, unwanted pang of pity for my wife. She'd been manipulated too in her own way, even if she'd made terrible choices. Why are you telling me this? I asked Diana. Because Marcus destroyed my life too, she said bitterly. And I want him to face consequences. Real ones. I'm going to the police about financial fraud. I think with your evidence and mine, we have enough to make a case. The revelation transformed my private betrayal into a criminal investigation that would drag even more secrets into the light. Diana was true to her word. Within a week, she'd filed a police report alleging financial fraud and manipulation. With her evidence combined with mine, and testimony from Sarah and the other women Marcus had deceived, the police began taking the matter seriously. Detective Morrison, who was assigned to the case, contacted me for an interview. I brought everything I had. The bank records showing transfers from my wife to Marcus, documentation of marital funds being used for the affair, credit card statements, everything. This is quite a picture, Detective Morrison said, spreading the documents across her desk. Your friend, well, former friend, seems to have been running what we'd call a romance scam operation, but targeting multiple women simultaneously. Can you actually prosecute him for that? I asked. If we can prove intent to defraud, yes. The fact that he was explicitly receiving money under false pretenses, promising relationships while seeing multiple women and lying about his circumstances, that builds toward fraud charges. The investigation expanded. More women came forward, women I hadn't even known about. One had given Marcus $10,000 for what he claimed was a business investment that never existed. Another had co-signed a loan for him that he defaulted on. The pattern was clear. Marcus was a predator who used romance and friendship to exploit people financially. My wife was also questioned. She initially tried to deny the payments, but the evidence was irrefutable. In her interview, which I later learned about through my attorney, she broke down and admitted everything. She said Marcus had convinced her they needed money to build their future together, that he was planning to leave his job and start a business and needed her support. He'd manipulated her expertly, mixing affection with financial requests, making her feel like she was investing in their future together. Meanwhile, he'd been telling the same story to multiple women, collecting money from all of them. The realization of how she'd been used seemed to break something in her. According to my attorney, she'd stopped fighting the divorce proceedings. She signed everything, agreed to all terms, and withdrew into herself. Her parents told me, in a rare awkward phone call, that she'd moved back in with them and was in therapy. I felt no satisfaction in her pain. I'd wanted accountability, not destruction. But the machine I'd set in motion was bigger than my personal revenge now. This was about justice for everyone Marcus had hurt. The district attorney's office decided to move forward with charges. Multiple counts of fraud, theft by deception, and identity fraud for using fake documents to secure one of the loans. Marcus was arrested on a Wednesday morning at his office, let out in handcuffs in front of his co-workers. The trial would expose everything, but it would also force me to confront questions about my own role in this disaster. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery, watching Marcus face the consequences of his actions. He'd hired a defense attorney who tried to paint him as someone who'd made mistakes in his personal life, but hadn't committed crimes. The prosecutor, a methodical woman named Judith, dismantled that argument piece by piece. Witness after witness testified. Diana described how she'd given him money for investments that never materialized. Sarah explained the emotional manipulation, the lies about working late, the fake business trips. Another woman testified about co-signing a car loan that Marcus defaulted on, destroying her credit. When my wife took the stand, she looked small and defeated. She testified about the affair, the money she'd transferred, the promises Marcus had made. She admitted she'd known it was wrong but had convinced herself it was worth it. The prosecutor asked her how much money she'd given him in total. "Almost $40,000, she said quietly, and I heard gasps in the courtroom. I felt strange watching her testify. This woman I'd loved, who I'd planned a future with, was now a stranger. But she was also a victim in her own right, even if her choices had hurt me deeply. Marcus took the stand in his own defense, which his lawyer probably regretted. He was arrogant, dismissive, claiming all the relationships had been consensual, and any money given was gifts between partners. When asked about the fake business documents, he claimed he'd been optimistic about opportunities that hadn't worked out. The jury didn't buy it. After 2 days of deliberation, they returned guilty verdicts on multiple fraud charges. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison and ordered restitution to all victims. When the sentence was read, Marcus's face finally showed real fear. After the trial ended, I stood outside the courthouse, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. I'd gotten justice. Marcus would face real consequences. My divorce was finalized. By all accounts, I'd won. But I also felt empty. The past year had consumed me. The investigation, the anger, the pursuit of accountability. Now that it was over, I had to figure out who I was without this mission driving me forward. My wife approached me as I stood there. She looked hesitant, broken. "I know you'll never forgive me," she said. "But I'm sorry. For all of it. I destroyed us, and I destroyed myself in the process." I looked at her for a long moment. "I hope you find a way forward," I said finally. "I really do. But it won't be with me." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and walked away. I watched her go, then took a deep breath. For the first time in a year, I felt like I could finally start thinking about my future instead of dwelling on the past. The ending of their story was just the beginning of mine, one built on truth, strength, and the knowledge that I deserved better. 6 months after the trial, I moved to a new apartment across town. The house held too many memories, and even though I'd won it in the divorce, I decided to sell it and start fresh. The money from the sale, combined with the settlement, gave me financial security and the freedom to reimagine my life. I'd started therapy shortly after everything exploded. Dr. Patricia Chun was a calm, insightful woman who helped me process not just the betrayal, but my own role in ignoring warning signs. "You trusted people you loved," she told me. "That's not a character flaw. What matters is what you learn from this experience." Through therapy, I realized I'd spent years being passive in my own life, going along with what others wanted, avoiding conflict, trusting blindly. The betrayal had forced me to develop a spine, to advocate for myself, to recognize my own worth. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my marriage. Tom, a college friend who'd moved to the city for work, became a regular gym buddy. We'd work out, then grab dinner, talking about everything except my past drama. He helped me remember how to just be a person again, not a victim or an investigator or a plaintiff. Work became a new focus. I'd been coasting in my marketing job for years, doing enough but not excelling. Now I threw myself into projects, taking on challenges I'd previously avoided. My boss noticed. I got promoted to senior strategist, leading campaigns I once would have been too timid to pitch. 6 months after the trial, I moved to a new apartment across town. The house held too many memories, and even though I'd won it in the divorce, I decided to sell it and start fresh. The money from the sale, combined with the settlement, gave me financial security and the freedom to reimagine my life. I'd started therapy shortly after everything exploded. Dr. Patricia Chun was a calm, insightful woman who helped me process not just the betrayal, but my own role in ignoring warning signs. "You trusted people you loved," she told me. "That's not a character flaw. What matters is what you learn from this experience." Through therapy, I realized I'd spent years being passive in my own life, going along with what others wanted, avoiding conflict, trusting blindly. The betrayal had forced me to develop a spine, to advocate for myself, to recognize my own worth. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my marriage. Tom, a college friend who'd moved to the city for work, became a regular gym buddy. We'd work out, then grab dinner talking about everything except my past drama. He helped me remember how to just be a person again, not a victim or an investigator or a plaintiff. Work became a new focus. I'd been coasting in my marketing job for years, doing enough but not excelling. Now I threw myself into projects, taking on challenges I'd previously avoided. My boss noticed. I got promoted to senior strategist, leading campaigns I once would have been too timid to pitch. A year after the trial, I received a letter forwarded from my old address. It was from Marcus, written from prison. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won out. The letter was surprisingly thoughtful, not the arrogant voice I remembered from the trial. He wrote about therapy sessions required as part of his sentence, about confronting the damage he'd caused, about recognizing patterns of manipulation he'd been using since college. He didn't ask for forgiveness, he said he didn't deserve it, but he wanted me to know he understood the magnitude of what he'd destroyed. "You were my best friend," he wrote, "and I betrayed that in the worst way possible. I don't expect you to care, but I needed you to know that I see it now. I see what I was. I'm trying to become something different." I read the letter twice, then filed it away. I didn't respond. Whatever growth Marcus was experiencing was his own journey, not mine to validate or acknowledge. But I also didn't feel angry anymore when I thought about him. He was just a person who'd made terrible choices and was now living with the consequences. My ex-wife had moved to a different state. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances. She was working in a small real estate office, living quietly, staying out of the spotlight. She'd reportedly stopped dating entirely. Part of me hoped she'd find peace eventually, but I knew we'd never speak again. Elena and I had been officially dating for 6 months when she suggested I meet her family. It felt significant, like crossing a threshold I hadn't been sure I was ready for. But when I met her parents at their Sunday dinner, something inside me relaxed. These were good people, normal people with no hidden agendas or secret lives. "So you're the marketing genius we keep hearing about," her father joked, shaking my hand. "Hardly a genius," I replied, smiling. "Just someone who's learning as he goes." Later that evening, Elena and I walked through her old neighborhood, talking about the future in ways that didn't scare me anymore. She mentioned wanting to expand her business, maybe hiring employees. I talked about potentially starting my own consultancy. We discussed trips we wanted to take, cities we wanted to explore, life goals that had nothing to do with past trauma. "Are you happy?" she asked suddenly, stopping on the sidewalk and turning to me. I thought about it honestly. "Yes," I said, realizing it was true. "I actually am." She smiled and took my hand. The betrayal had nearly destroyed me. The pursuit of justice had consumed me. But somewhere in the aftermath I discovered something more valuable. The ability to rebuild myself into someone stronger, wiser, and more authentic than I'd ever been before. The past was finally past. The future was mine to create. And this time I knew exactly what I deserved.